our agenda. Director Jacqueline.
Yes, I'd like to add an item for letter of support for KES for funding application.
You have a second? Dr. Kieran, all in favor?
We need 2/3. Guess it's the late up.
We got 2/3 silent vote. So we will add that to the agenda, and perhaps because we should have added it, maybe let's start with that.
Oh,
If we could.
I haven't pulled it up. Sure. If it became 8 point.
Let's begin then with the staff report and the emergency program report with John Jackson.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I submitted the report. It's in the package, so I won't read it all verbatim. Some highlights. It's a very busy summer. This is the third quarter report, so technically it ended at the end of September. Very busy summer. We had our emergency support services volunteers helped out with 5 level 1 incidents this period. So these are all separate residential fires, people that had a fire in where they live, and then needed help with things like food, lodging, clothing, and incidentals until they could get their own resources accessible to them. So 5 of those, which was a pretty busy quarter, actually. And then the big news, which I'm sure everyone heard about, but it seems like so long ago, but really it isn't, was an extremely busy summer with the wildfires. The lightning storm actually started in the middle of July, and I think the last evacuation actually got lifted somewhere around the end of August. So that whole basically six-week period or 5-week period, we had a full-scale activation with evacuation orders in place. Residents, unfortunately, were forced to leave their homes for their safety. And we had a full emergency operations centre set up in Nelson to coordinate that response and to assist the people while they were evacuated also. It was pretty unprecedented. At no time in RDCK memory do we think we've ever evacuated a full municipality. Obviously, we have member municipalities as part of our program, and we've had partial evacuations, but never a full municipality. It's just tremendously disruptive on everything, on government, on staff, on residents. This year, because of these fires, we had 2 municipalities we had to evacuate, unfortunately. So it was pretty unprecedented. In total, 14 evacuation orders were issued, 5 evacuation alerts, and over 2,000 properties and parcel IDs were impacted by those orders. Fortunately, I guess looking on the bright side, I mean, we had some property damage, some structural damage, 3 homes and 2 outbuildings, but it could have been so much worse. The important thing for us was taking care of the residents while they were evacuated. To do that, we set up reception centres and resiliency centres, which were activated, staffed by a combination of staff and volunteers, including community navigators, which were there to help people connect with information resources and other supports as they needed them. Those extended beyond the evacuation orders, so even after the orders have been lifted and it was safe for people to go home, they still had access to resources as they needed assistance. You know, once they get back home, once things start to settle down, then people quite commonly experience the shock of the event kind of kicks in and they need assistance. So we kept the resiliency centres open for a period beyond the evacuation orders, so there was always a resource and a way for people to get support. The highlights. So after any big response like that, any big activation, we run after action reviews, which is a way for us to get together with all the people that were involved. So we hear back from staff, we'll be talking to the municipal directors and the elected officials for the areas, as well as the volunteers and the people that responded to the actual event. We'll be talking about what went well and maybe what didn't go so well, and looking for learnings and continuous improvement opportunities. So that's the big step we need to take next. Those are booked and they're coming in the next month or so. And then we'll be taking that information on board and seeing what we can incorporate into our plans to be ready for the next one. And that's the way it works. That's the cycle. So we prepare and then we respond. Other news, we continue with our work on general preparedness. This sort of time of year, obviously, as we get towards winter, we're looking at warming centres if that should be necessary. A lot of our work is directed to residents and helping them understand their hazards. And certainly some communities are reliant on electrical power. If that goes down because there's a windstorm that brings down trees, for example, that's a fairly common event in the RDCK, then making sure that people have a plan for somewhere they can go to warm up should they need to. We are still recruiting and training ESS responders. That's an ongoing process. They're volunteers and they come and go. So we're just continuing to work on that. And then we've got a few other projects, which I listed at the end, mostly grant funded, mostly related to our emergency operations work, just helping us be more ready with things like ESS support and our emergency operations center. That's me. Thank you.
John, any questions? Director Jackson?
Yeah, thanks through the chair to John. We did manage to get in to talk to the ministry a little bit about from the BC Wildfire Service side of their after action process. And I was a little surprised in that conversation. This was specific to recovery, really more in the Lardo area. They said, oh yeah, they were reviewing their reports and they were ready to go with a meeting. And I understand BC Wildfire Service held a community meeting already a month or so ago. And I was wondering, are they coordinating with you, or how is that going? And is BC Wildfire Service holding, or the Ministry of Forest holding meetings separately with Silverton or other communities?
Not that I know of. It sounds like it's separate to ours. The BC Wildfire Service has a program they're running as a bit of a pilot in Lardo, and I'm wondering if that was the people they were talking to rather than the community as a whole. But that's the first I've heard about it there.
That's possible. So, Area D Director and Board Chair Watson had asked for that meeting specifically, and then with family issues, she couldn't be EBCM, so a few of us sat in on that in lieu. And I think it's worth following up. The response is a team response. You have to provide all the social service support, and BC Wildfire Service has to deal with the fire. Plus, our fire services deal with some of that, of course. And it just took me off guard that there would be a meeting first so quickly. And maybe it's exactly because of what you said, because after action responses I've seen sometimes they're like 6 months long. I think it's worth following up. Maybe I'll give a note to Director Watson, just asking. I don't know if she actually made it, if she's back in time for that. Okay, close that loop.
Yeah, we can connect with BCWS and just have a chat with them about what happened and if there's any learnings to share. Thank you.
Other questions? Director Van Burton?
Yes, thank you through the chair. Just a quick question, John. How does Dan Seguin fit in with your work and your group? Because he spoke to us at board on this matter.
Yeah, Dan Seguin is my boss.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so my next question is, when do you expect the summary, the recommendation report? You've talked about conducting, the report says you will be conducting, you said you are conducting after action reviews.
Yeah, that's
which is
this month.
Okay, so when would we be, as elected officials, be able to see those recommendations in summary?
I can't answer that, but I'll look into it for you.
Okay, so one of the things that I expressed with Dan and the board was the loss of resources for RDCK committed to the EOC, which I see you have more funding coming in for, based on your report, to enhance or better the procedures in the EOC. But my concern is with the required staff levels in order to stand up and manage that EOC, RDCK business comes to a halt. And I'm concerned about that. So that needs to be addressed somehow in these conversations, is that we're going to have another situation, but the business of RDCK must continue. It can't come to a grinding halt, because the 2 months of delay with staff needing to support, obviously, those people that needed help out there, transcends itself into 3.5 months of delay for further business and activity. So if that's going to be, an anticipated yearly event, we need to figure out different practices that we can continue working through RDCK business for the purpose, for benefit of our taxpayers. So just want to reiterate that is an important focus in these conversations.
Thank you. Respectfully, I feel that's maybe not a topic for this committee, but maybe a board discussion with CEO Bourne present.
And that's why I asked when this report should be available, because that would launch that conversation. But to plant that seed in there, so that when you're discussing these things, you can think in those terms, can be advantageous.
Thank you.
Director Chair.
Thanks, John, for your report. In the issue of warming huts that you're thinking about, and as the town works through the process of considering an emergency shelter for the homeless for the winter, is that on your radar at all for emergency management to provide some sort of temporary warming facilities?
To clarify, kind of yes and no, I guess. That's probably not clarifying things at all. In terms of warming centres and the scope that emergency management takes care of, it's a temporary place. No one would sleep there, according to the rules and the framework we operate within. A place a shelter where someone will go and sleep and stay is outside of the scope of what local government does. That comes under BC housing. So that's a provincial discussion. So that's outside of the scope of what we do.
Thank you.
Director Vandenberg.
Further to that point, though, and we know of the challenges that Creston is having to provide that, the province has really just said, here, deal with this. We've never discussed what opportunities lie in RDCK to assist with facilities that could take care of the small portion of the homelessness challenge. And I'm wondering why. I've talked about that. Why is it Creston has to deal with it? We should at least have those conversations. So further to your point.
Yeah, further to that point, just not really thinking of a permanent location to house the homeless, but just whether the emergency warming centers, which might be needed in an emergency, overnight use, could be considered, or have you considered at all possibility? It may affect the size or location of the facility that you may be thinking about providing.
The planning that we're doing is really for residents that are unable to heat their homes effectively, and may come forward as an emergency situation. It is currently excluding long-term care or overnight stays. The rules say clearly no beds, no one sleeps there. It's not 24/7 operation. So yeah, we may be talking a different kind of scenario.
Thanks for the clarification.
This isn't entirely new. I mean, for many years, we've had groups in community that look to see, they do wellness checks, right? And they're, you know, sometimes the wellness check has been in hot weather. And we have a few community halls in places, not in Creston, where people can cool down in some of this house. We've done a lot of wellness checks you'll find in community because if someone you know is ill, recovering from a hospital stay, and so community just does that. And the warming thing, they have, you know, we've known there's been seniors in some areas that if you visited them, their house is cold because they don't want to spend money to heat the house. They put another sweater on, and this isn't new. And so I don't know if part of the planning is to talk to groups that may have been involved in the past with these kind of wellness checks to find out what's been done, or if some place has been offered to residents that can warm up on the coldest times of the year, recognizing it's never been overnight unless it's someone as a guest at someone else's house. Like, do you have any history of what's been done in community before? Because this isn't new.
Our work is concentrating on identifying those facilities and what's actually available at them. So do they have backup?
Yep.
Do they have air conditioning? That sort of thing. And then beyond that, it's getting us ready to activate those should there be a request. That's where our plan's focused.
So if you had contacts in every community, or do you have, would that help? Like, you know, Boswell Hall is good for heat and air conditioning and backup power.
Yeah.
I believe that Ashram,
on our database.
Riendell has a number of individuals I know have offered accommodation before. Pastor Paul at Crawford Bay is probably a good contact, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But if you wanted more contacts, I think it'd be easy to come up with.
Yes, we have lots, but if there's others, then please suggest them. Thank you.
I think most municipalities, ours included, have developed some of those plans. And just as an example, about 2 years ago, it was, I think it was late November, it was a cold spell. Tree fell on the power line, Crawford Hill, and a lot of properties were without power for an extended period of time. And once we realized that it was going to be an extended period of time, we had our staff, our firefighter staff, do wellness checks to make sure that people were safe in their homes. If they weren't, it would have been provided a warming center. So I guess when these things happen, there is a plan in place, and I know that there's more coordination needed. And the difference between it's a warming center and the emergency shelters, of course, is the size of your community and what they need. And as you said, if a senior citizen is without power, that's a totally different need than having people living on tents. And so we, again, as a municipality, are preparing for probably different things than the outlying areas like regional district for different events. But we are all required to make those plans now to add and I would say they are developing. And a lot of things that you don't think of until all of a sudden you realize, yeah, we got to do this. And once you've done that, the plans do develop. Just, another example is this summer's fire emergencies. We live here and fires were over here. We benefit because there was an EOC open, and the experience that you've gathered and the review on what we can do differently benefits us for the next time when the fire's over here instead of for there. So developing all this stuff has been very helpful. Experiencing it is probably the best teacher there is. So we appreciate what the RCP has done. And in fact, we're in working through an EOC. It's been a challenge, and it's been a great learning exercise as well as a requirement. So it's very valuable for our community. Any other questions?
If I could editorialize for a second, I think that's the point you made there about the fire being in another place and not here. The upshot of that is that fuel in the other place has now gone.
Yeah.
But the fuel here didn't burn, so it's still here.
Right.
So where is that as of now? That's what always sticks with me after these things.
Yeah.
What didn't burn and what's waiting there for us next year.
Well, the lingering problems of landslides and heavy rainfall and mudslides.
Yeah, for sure.
things you don't think about until you have the emergency. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Director Jack.
Yeah, Chair, apologies, I only got here at 5:02 today. Normally I try and get here 15. So I have pulled up the reason of asking for a late item, if you wanted to deal with it, how we didn't actually slot it anywhere.
One small point of order before we do that, just we need to receive the minutes, which I sort of skipped over.
Oh, yeah.
So, just we acknowledge that we received the minutes of the previous meeting. And that brings me back up to where I should be in the agenda, which we'll do the other part now, if that's okay. You're ready.
Okay, all right, thanks. So at agenda prep every month, Chair, Vice Chair, Rural Chair look at Rural Committee and Board and in camera possible potential agenda, see what's ready, what suits policy, what's timely, a lot of things. And the discussion yesterday hit on actually 2 requests for delegations. There might be an email shortly clarifying one, which will not go to board and didn't come here. And the other request for delegation, which is more appropriate here because it's from KES, it's time sensitive, and the request was the board provide, actually, let me just go to, I have it in chat, just enter it in chat, there it is. So the request was that the board provide a letter of support for KES and KFEK's recently submitted REDIP application and that the board approved $15,000 financial contribution to the proposed project. Well, that's to do with, there's follow-up information here I didn't put in chat, which we actually have someone in the room who can speak to it if permitted as a late delegation. But it's about childcare and it's time sensitive. So by board policy, if this went to board next week, we would not move a recommendation because policy is not to move and act on something at the same time as we hear about it. Because in fairness for the board, someone at the cusp, someone from wherever, Castlegar, they say, what's this about? I need to know more. We'll talk to you next month. So by board policy, this would be rejected. However, if it comes to committee today and now, it will automatically be up by placeholder on the board agenda. So it's not a presentation to the board. It had time for the participants to discuss it. We can make a decision and the board can trust us and make the recommendation. There's also a couple of holes here because it says provide money from where. That could be a half-hour conversation at board. Not wanting it to be a half-hour conversation here, we could go 2 ways. I could just move this request that the board provide a letter of support for KS and KFEK's recently submitted REDIP application. We need to add words for regional childcare, and that the board approve a $15,000 financial contribution to the proposed project from, and then we have to put a service number because I don't think the board's going to support it from general admin. Again, it would get referred and wouldn't happen. So at your pleasure, Chair. I can move that recommendation. We can hear from the proponent first, whatever you think.
So let's do that because he was here and partly for that reason. And so I would like you to move that recommendation and then we'll have a few help fill in the blank. So,
well, we're discussing a recommendation. Normally we don't let the public participate. So if we had to hear something from KES, it'd be best to be heard first and then I'd move the recommendation.
fair enough. Hugh, can you help us out with this?
Okay, so I'll just approach. So we, KDS, based on some recommendations, the Economic Action Partnership had developed a proposal that was Creston Valley specific. Well, it's the issue, but I mean the area. And we had developed that to the point where we needed a substantial chunk of change from the regional district to be able to accomplish that. The province and ministry had said that if it's a local project, you're going to have a much stronger financial contribution than if it's regional. So regional projects were more bold. These are my words, than what a centralized one was. There were pressures on the regional district to be able to come up with confirmation of the funding before the 31st of October. And in spite of correspondence back and forth, we weren't able to get in confirmation that funding was going to be available. So at the last minute, we could only submit one proposal. So we had another proposal that we were able to adapt to that would have accomplished other things that were required and directed through the EAP, particularly as related to the childcare part. And a lot of those components were already in place. So when the one could not happen in time, we linked to the other one, which explains why the last kind of minute. But because the funding level is such a significant difference, it's only, instead of, it's not 10 times as much as what the first one was, then not quite, but then we had a lot more confidence, and it wasn't going to compete with other local projects that had been submitted under the READIP program. So we are in a process of trying to find other ways of accomplishing what was in that original proposal that was actually on the agenda here today. So we have moved to that one because we were able to submit that one and have confidence that we would be able to support it. Now, Leah is available if you want more specifics of it. I don't know how far you want to go into it, but basically the regional district wasn't able to confirm the $120,000 that we needed to do the local project. So when that wasn't going to work, we still, with a mad scramble based on that lady, we were able to submit another proposal that was going to accomplish some of the things that other things that were of significance to the community and critical to the EAP guidelines that we had. So that's sort of, I'm trying to kind of give the overview of it in kind of a broad context. So that's where we are today.
Dr. Vandenberg?
Yes, thank you through the chair. So, Hugh, I'm looking at the original proposal, if you will. And I don't even know the date on this. It's back in October, third week in October. So based on what you've said this morning, what has changed? So when I look at this, which came out of the EAP, which I didn't attend that meeting, so I was a little bit left-footed, and to what you're describing now, what has changed?
Well, under the EAP, there are a number of priority areas like housing and childcare that are quite large. This one also hit some other priority areas like agriculture, and we've reached out to Tanya, and we are looking at other programs that are going to help to accomplish some of that. But the childcare component continues to be a significant part of the Economic Action Partnership, a very large part of it.
Through the chair, if I may add to what Hugh is explaining, and I actually prepared a few slides to make that a little bit clearer for the committee. Would it be all right if I present some of that?
I think it would help answer some questions. So yeah, please do.
Okay, perfect. And can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So the original proposal was broadly a proposal to strengthen our efforts in terms of resident retention and attraction by focusing on three components. The first of that was the recruitment of childcare workers and healthcare workers. The second component was working to strengthen the Creston Valley events economy, and working with the chamber in that regard. And then lastly, support to Fields Forward, because they are doing some really exciting work at the moment, which includes developing a product line. And this proposal would have helped them on the distribution of that product line. So developing distribution channels, marketing, etc. So that was what we had submitted and discussed with the EAP committee on October 7th. This proposal, though, would have required an investment from local government, specifically the town of Creston areas A, B, and C, of $120,000. That's the leveraging funding that we would have needed to even be considered an eligible applicant for REDIP. So because it was such an enormous ask and because of the timeline, as Hugh explained, we decided to pivot to a different application, which still retains this component specifically. And more broadly, it strengthens the childcare sector. And we did that because of an opportunity that presented itself, but also because based on the feedback that we had received from the EAP committee, childcare is by far the most urgent need of all of these, and the one that's not being addressed right now. The town of Creston, of course, does have a physician recruiter and a healthcare recruiter. But the one that's really not being touched on at all, and that we really do desperately need to address, is the childcare sector. And the other reason why we were able to develop this proposal on very, very short notice is through our partnership with Community Futures East Kootenay. Londa Morris, our head of finance and operations, has actually been working on this in collaboration with CFEK for many, many, many months. And we were able to leverage that partnership to develop a new proposal, which focuses very heavily on the recruitment of childcare workers, and then also other supported childcare centers. And I'd like to present some data to you in just a second to explain why this is important. But maybe we'll pause. I should pause there to check if there are any further questions about just the difference in the proposal. So this was the original, and this is the new proposal.
Yeah, so through the chair. So we've taken, we've reduced this down from multiple aspects to one, childcare. So what's also not in there is the secondary food processing or fields forward.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to clarify, but the money stays the same.
Actually,
The contribution expectation from ABC and Creston still stays the same.
Actually, no, it's about only 10% of the original ask. So we are asking to support the new proposal. We're asking for $15,000, not just from Town of Creston A, B, and C, but from the regional district as a whole, because this is a regional project. So a much more achievable ask, which is another benefit of the new proposal. So the parts that we did not include in the new proposal would be these two here at the bottom. Well, I suppose this one as well. And a couple of reasons for that. So since we developed the concept to support fields forward in secondary food processing, we had tentative confirmation. I'm not sure if this is totally confirmed, but fields forward had been successful in some other funding applications that would address many of the deliverables that we had in mind, especially in terms of developing distribution channels for their new product line. We continue to work with Fields Forward on some other funding that is available, and actually I have a meeting set up with Tanya next week to do just that. There are other funding sources that would help us to achieve these same goals. And KS broadly also has some other mechanisms in place to support the chamber, which includes providing financial support for their lunch and learn sessions. But again, we plan to work with them and identify other funding streams. And they themselves did submit a REDUP application, which also prompted us to reconsider whether or not we should submit a very local application that would then compete not only with the Chamber's REDUP application, but also the Town of Creston's REDUP application for a Kootenay. So with the regional application, the benefit is, once again, that it comes with a much more achievable ask, and that's why we felt confident in submitting it, even without confirmation from the regional district, because 15,000 is, quite a bit easier to come up with than 120,000. And also, based on feedback from JEDI, we knew that a regional project would be much more attractive to the funder, and again, not competing with those local projects at all, and because there is such an immense need for childcare. And the reason why we partnered with CFEK is because they had just worked on a study on research with Selkirk College and MITAX, which was released 2 months ago. And their study was focused on understanding the challenges and the needs of childcare in our region. And they had a really good response. They surveyed 76 out of 160 centers. And there's a long report that goes along with this, but I'm not going to, present the whole thing to you today. But the two key findings that really, really stood out is that 30% of current childcare centers do not consider it financially viable for them to keep operating. And we know that through the province's new spacing funding, there are a lot of plans in the works to create new centers. But I mean, any construction project, even if it starts today, those centers will not be open for another year and a half or 2 years. But in the interim, we do need the current centers that we have to stay open. And even the centers that have already been approved to start construction within the near future, they only really, provide some of the need, not all of the need that we experience here in the Kootenays and especially in the RDCK as well. The other key finding that emerged from that study is that to staff these new centers so they can actually not only, open their doors but welcome children, we would need Kootenay-wide about 300 additional ECEs, which is a mountainous task, especially if communities are going to be handling all of that recruitment on their own. And just to give a bit of context, every year the College of the Rockies graduates 10 to 20 ECEs, but now we need 300. So the only way to actually get that number is if we had a dedicated childcare recruiter working with communities, working with each of these new centers, and hopefully the town of Creston will soon count among them, to staff the new spaces that have been created. And that is why our proposal, the new proposal, focuses quite heavily on the recruitment part, but then also supporting the centers that we have right now, the at-risk centers, to not close their door in the interim, because that would be disastrous for communities in the Kootenays. Many more centers hope to expand, but don't have the capacity to do so. So that would be the secondary component here to support the childcare centers. Okay, so that is the new proposal in a nutshell, and I'm of course happy to answer any questions that you have.
Dr. Vandenberg.
Thank you, and to see that, Director Jackman. So, don't know what an ECE is. I must have
Early
missed that.
childhood educator.
Thank you. And my first question is this public and private opportunities? Is my first question is, and then the second question is, in terms of the funding, is this representative funding, or is this going to be a request split by 4? That's my second question.
Okay, so for the first question, so the at-risk centers could be either for-profit or non-for-profit.
Okay.
Most of them, so we do have that research as well, when it comes to the small, like at-home, in-home daycare centers with a single owner operator. These are mostly for-profit, but childcare is not a profitable business. They might technically be for profit, but it's really hard to actually make money in childcare, which is part of why we have this problem. When it comes to the expanding centers, most of them are nonprofit organizations who would like to open up more spaces, but lack the capacity. And would you mind clarifying just the second question, Director Vandenberg, whether it's...
I don't know that you're able to answer it.
The funding, Chair, if I might, I have some serious thoughts about this. Okay. And you're each going to receive as board members a questionnaire soon, which actually speaks to this. It may sound simple and less burdensome to go to the regional board of 20 and ask for funding because less than $1,000 per participant. That is far more difficult to do. And maybe that's partly why we have the policy. Don't come to the whole board and say, let's have a little bit of money. There are hundreds of organizations that want a little bit of money, and it adds up. So it is far more difficult. I would say it would fail, at least for a month, to ask the board for a mere $15,000. First thing you'd probably hear is Castlegar I&J have invested heavily into childcare, built a facility, supported it. They might say, well, where are you coming from? We're good. And that's a half-hour conversation. And it won't be permitted at board. We have 600-page agendas and more sometimes. We have a massive amount of business. The wrong way to introduce something is a board delegation and saying, we want money. Policy says, no, it's just an unworkable approach. The proper way to do it is to come sub-regionally to the committee that maybe is your best hope for funding. So what I put in chat the second time, and Stuart said, yeah, it sounds okay. I did email him separately. is to suggest that if we try and fund a mere $15,000, we do it through the EAP, I reference S107 and S108, our two economic development services. I say put it in the 2025 budget because it won't happen this fiscal year. And I say use the allocation formula currently that exists for splitting between S107 and 108. We can deal with that, agree or disagree, right here, and it can go to board, and board will accept our decision because we have a strong sub-regional caucus, if you want to call it that. We work our stuff out. Trying to fund it through the board on short notice against policy for all the reasons I stated probably would fail because somebody else will have a better idea that you want to run up the flag. I don't mind if we support the rest of the regional district or Kootenays beyond with our little bit of funding initially. There's nothing wrong with that. Because something happening in the cusp will probably help us later. Something happening in Lardo, without a doubt, is going to help us if we, well, it already has. That training program is being adopted. So I think our only path on funding is decide here between the four of us if we want to put this in the 2025 budget. And I've made a mistake. If I've made a mistake by saying split it this way instead of 75-25, say so. I'll agree to either to get this moving forward. And it's in chat, but I don't know if everyone's seen that I could read. Would you want me to read, Chair? I'm ready to move a recommendation once the delegate's finished.
Well, I thank you for your input because I know community-wise, we have been struggling to establish a daycare. We're looking for funding. We're looking for, as you know, probably we are trying to get about 110 space daycare included in our housing. We need to staff that. We need to show the need for it, which is, we know the need. Like about 20% of families that need daycare have it. So it's a serious concern. It gets in the way of recruiting physicians and other people in our community. So the need is definitely there. And I like the way that you've basically articulated this as to what our path forward is. And you made that motion, and I think it's a good motion. I think it's not a great deal of money out of our hands, but it does a lot for our community.
Well, sure, I'd like to make
the motion.
I'd like to make the full motion that I've added words, but you shouldn't do that with the delegate present at the table because we shouldn't ask questions of the public while we're deliberating motion.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if we're finished with questions.
Would we table that to the end of the meeting then?
No, I'd move it right now. If we're finished with the delegation, I'll move it right now.
Okay.
If there's no further questions for you. Or Leah, sorry.
Either or. All right, I'll retire to the.
So I like, and I did run this past Stuart for what it's worth. I'd like to move that the board provide a letter of support for KES and Community Futures East Kootenays recently submitted REDIP application, and that the board approve a $15,000 financial contribution under the 2025 financial plan to the proposed project from S107 and S108 with a split of funding based on the allocation formula for the Creston Area ABC Economic Action Partnership. And if that's seconded, I have one more little comment. Second. So if I can, we took huge efforts to add on a childcare to the community facilities in Crawford Bay, and it remained essentially vacant for years because we couldn't get early childcare educators. It was so frustrating. Fully certified for up to 15 young people, including whatever number of little toddlers, 2-year-olds, couldn't go anywhere with it because of the lack of the trained people. So I'm fully behind any motion, any direction, any project that'll get this going. And we're talking a decade, 12 years ago, this was an issue. It's still an issue.
Any further discussion on the motion?
Chair?
Just,
Yes, go ahead.
Through the chair, I just wanted to apologize for the confusion of the other motion also being on this agenda. I had put that on in advance when we were trying to do that email vote and discuss things previously. And being away last week, I neglected to tell Robin to remove that. So there is some confusion with that one being on there. And I apologize for that. But when you get to that item, you can essentially just skip it.
7.3.
I wanted to mention that as part of this conversation simply because that application was discussed at the outset.
That's item 7.3 on the agenda, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
That was the only thing I was going to say. The 7.3 is not correct based on table motion. So I have nothing further.
Call the question and all in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. So we can move on. And by moving on, we will invite the Creston Museum Archive to come forward.
Your president.
Lots of chairs here. Well, Chair, I don't know if we were neglectful. Could we offer freedom of the floor to Councillor West, please?
Yes.
Someone.
Motion moved, second by Director Van Berg, all in favor? Motion is carried. There you go. All right.
We're back. It is a year today that we reopened the museum. And in that year, we have been very, very busy. I've kind of hit some of the highlights for you in the report that Robin sent out to you last week sometime. But just a quick overview, we have a board that is working very hard to build the foundations for the museum. They have all taken board orientation training. We are reviewing our policies and bylaws. We have a tenfold increase in membership over where we were a year and a half ago. We're working hard to sustain that engagement. We will find out how well we're doing when we send out the renewal notices in the next few weeks. But to go from, depending on whose list you use, 24 to 32 members, and now we have 284, that is a huge achievement. I would not recommend that particular strategy as the best member recruitment strategy going, but it worked, and now we're trying to make sure that we maintain that level of support. Operationally, we are back fully to our previous hours and standards. We are now meeting or exceeding pre-COVID programming. So like everybody else, we took a major hit during 2020 through 2022. We thought we were going to make it back to pre-COVID programming last year. Kind of didn't happen, but we are back now and even exceeding. We've had one of our busiest summers on record. Our school participation has dropped from the peak we saw during COVID. We fully expected that during COVID. Teachers were under enormous pressure to get their kids out of classrooms, and we were one of the very few. In fact, at one point, I think we were the only opportunity for field trips and community engagement. So we stepped up. It was exhausting, but I'm actually kind of glad we are not doing 45 to 50 school programs in a year because we're so small. That was exhausting. It was a bit much, but even now we're still seeing triple what we had pre-COVID. Prior to COVID, we figured we were lucky if we saw 6 to 8 school groups in a season, and almost all of those were in the last few weeks of June. This year, you'll notice down at the bottom, we are seeing 23 local school groups. We now have fall and spring seasons for our school programming. So that's all very good. We have also, some of you might have seen it on Saturday when we did an open house. We have recently transitioned to a cloud-based collections management program. This is a huge improvement over our previous Microsoft Access-based thing that didn't do any of the stuff we needed it to do. And the best part is this cloud-based one means we can launch it publicly, so our collections will be publicly accessible. We're hoping to be ready to do that within the next year. In terms of community, this is where we are busiest, where we are very absolutely the proudest of what we do. We work very hard with a huge number of community partners, everything from schools and seniors groups to the Fall Fair, Blossom Festival, the Centennial celebrations this year. This year we were all over 6 different community centennial projects and programs, in addition to facilitating the production of Chris Luke's video to make sure that Yucca-Nuki involvement was part of the centennial celebrations. In addition to that, we've done special presentations and programs for 5 other community events and 32 public programming and event activities. We've worked really, really hard to make sure that locals see the museum as a place for them. And you can see that 66% of our visitors and our participation are locals. We are not the community tourist destination. I mean, we are a tourism destination, but that is not what we are all about. We've worked hard to maintain our standing as a leading community or a leading museum in the province, and we have done that. If you talk to people at BC Museums Association or other museums throughout the province, they will point to what we do as an example of what small museums can do, and even what larger museums can aspire to. We do a phenomenal level of programming for the size of an organization we are. A couple of things that we are working on is really building our ability to connect with people who don't normally visit museums. So we're looking at people with mobility, accessibility challenges, cultural communities who tend not to be well reflected in community museums. We're working really hard to do that. Prime example of how well we're succeeding is the fact that we are seeing groups from Nexus, both Cranbrook and Creston Nexus groups, formerly CDSCL, coming every single, and they come in and they go for a tour and they tell us, sometimes we hear the same stories from them over and over again, but they're coming in. And we've recently signed up, been accepted to participate in the Pathways program. This is a year-long program. It's put on partly through BC Museums Association, BC Arts Council, and I'm forgetting the third one, third provincial arts umbrella organization. And it is designed to help small organizations build tactical plans, not just the theoretical eye in the sky strategic type planning, but tactical, how we are going to build inclusivity and engagement at all levels of the organization. So we're looking forward to that. We start that in January. Going forward, in addition to addressing some of the accessibility challenges that we have, and there are some significant ones when you're dealing with a building that was built by a guy who was not, yeah. Yeah. The guy who built the museum building was a bit of a hermit and a recluse, and he was not building, certainly not in 1962, he was not building with an eye to getting public visitors with all sorts of challenges into the museum. So we are contending with that, but we are working very hard to address some of that over the next couple of years. We've also recently acquired a fairly large collection of antique belt-driven machinery that at this point is stored behind a building covered in tarps. We want to do something a bit better with that. We are embarking on a process to engage our members and volunteers, and to a lesser extent, the rest of the community in what that's going to look like. We have also been talking to Columbia Basin Trust about a potential partnership for managing the red grain elevator. That is very nebulous at the moment. We're interested, but there's a lot that needs to be dealt with in that. So we are looking budget-wise, we're looking pretty healthy, but the funding pendulum that was very, I have to say, prosperous during COVID. There was an enormous amount of support for museums during COVID. That pendulum is now swinging back the other way. So we are seeing not only fewer project grants available, operating grants we do have one other operating grant through BC Arts Council. That one, they are reviewing how they do everything. There's new programs coming up, new priorities. And what BC Arts Council has done now is told us that we don't need to reapply. Normally we reapply every 2 years. They've just said, no, you just need to do an interim report for the next 2 years, but you also cannot ask for more. Get $20,000 a year from them for the next 2 years. And unfortunately, costs go up. Similar with our seasonal staff funding programs. All of this that we do, all of our community programming is based on 1 full-time staff member, 2 part-time staff members, one of whom is our maintenance person who does not do public programming, and then 3 or 4 seasonal staff members. We achieve a lot more than most other museums, some of whom are considerably larger than us, on very, very small staff numbers. And if we can't pay those staff people, we cannot do this. So our summer student funding Theoretically, it will fund up to 75%, but practically, realistically, what we've been seeing for the last few years is more in the neighborhood of 50% of what it actually costs us to hire those staff. We look at 16-week, 40 hours per week, call it $20 an hour. By the time you add in the mandatory employment costs, we're looking at $12,000 per position times 4, and we are paying half of that. The funding that we have relied on in the past is shrinking, so we are asking for a 5% increase from town and regional district to help us fill that gap, at least until BC Arts Council releases their new funding. We might be able to ask them. BC Arts Council is a challenging application, but yeah.
Hi, Tammy, and thanks for the invitation on Saturday to come
Good
out
to see you.
and walk around. So as I look at your budget, I just want to clarify the amount that you're requesting from RDCK, the operating grants, is the same before. It's 125,619.
That's for 2025.
Yes.
Our fiscal year runs January to December, so the check that we received in August 2025 actually supports our 2026 operating expenses.
So then the number
So
is 131,9.
sorry, let me turn to the right page. The 131.9, yeah, is what
Okay,
we would
thank
be
you for that.
requesting.
Secondly, you refer to a couple of items in here. What's the Murphy? What is this Murphy equipment?
That's the belt-driven machinery.
So that is out of your pocket 30 grand to manage the Murphy equipment?
Well, we've allocated $30,000 for a project to basically be a construction project. We don't know quite what or where yet. We've got a few options on the table for where we could put that, the museum.
And
Realistically, a building project is going to be more. That's probably our cost, and then we will be seeking additional funding through various funders.
okay, and if I may, last one. We talked somewhere in here, and I can't find it anymore, but there is an opportunity that you board and staff will sit down and do a strat plan.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, and I understand that that'd be the first one in a long time, or first
one ever.
First one ever. So I commend you for the strat plan. That is so important. I guess the reminder when we're visiting on Saturday, walking around, was you get the sense that you're you're busting at the seams. How are you going to change things up, or how do you grow, or maybe you don't grow, but that's part of the whole strategic planning conversation.
Exactly.
Is
Yeah.
what does this look like in the future?
Mhm.
From my point of view, it's what is the value of the taxpayers to go forward? And with a strategic plan, I have a lot more confidence
Yeah.
that you can have those.
Yeah, we are working with Columbia Basin Trust on that through their nonprofit advisors program. We've been approved for the funding. Our consultant is Mike Stolt out of Nelson, and we will be working with him beginning January. We've got 2. Do you remember what those dates were? We're like middle and end of January, something like that. So that will be happening very quickly. We will be presenting that strategic plan at our ATM in April, and I hope you come.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, thanks. So I guess the first one would be, it would be much easier if you phrase your request for 2025, ask for RDCK as 2025.
Yeah, it shows up in our budget for 2026, but yeah.
But beyond that, it's compounded every year by an additional 5%. So whether that's realistic or not, I don't know.
We'll see what the consumer price index says.
And and that's, I don't know if we have multi-year projections of that, but if we started projecting everybody at roughly double the current 2.6% CPI, I know what's going to happen as we get into January and February. We're going to say we have to cut something back somewhere. Mm-hmm. So this might as well start the conversation today. To project 5% every year increase isn't realistic.
No.
So I don't know, as I say, if there's any long-term CPI forecasts or anything from any of the economists, that's a better number to use. I've always said governments who kind of govern at 3 to 5% growth is the expectation are foolish and aren't doing their job, because that's not realistic. Anyway, so if we see a lot of budgets with 5% compounded every year, what do we do with that? We shouldn't just move those into the 5-year plan and just say, okay, we'll see what happens. Also, as I went through a few things, it's looking like some of your expenses are projected at, from 2024 projected into the 2025 budget, which is sort of old data, 10% increases. Like some of the numbers like utility and stuff are just 10% jumps across the board. But when you total some of the columns, there might be an item missing from a line because the totals of, say, one column is shown as 41,000 and change, and it's actually 34,300. And if you go to the next
You have a
column,
formula glitch in there somewhere? I will check
there's,
that out.
if you can check under your, beginning with property expenses, if you either have a formula glitch where you added at 10% or something like that, not all 10%. So I'm curious as to why some of those arbitrary, potentially arbitrary numbers were plugged in.
Yeah, I can check those out. Yeah, formulas do weird things sometimes.
So other than that, I guess it's cleaner if we just get almost a letter request, simple, saying that we request that the 2025 RDCK budget allocation for this service be increased from this to this. And then it's absolutely crystal clear. Right now, I'm not sure what direction the staff would go. That'll be up to my colleagues, I guess, whether we plug a number into the draft budget or not. And then the other thing, it's all draft until we see all the numbers. Mm-hmm. What's always important is real growth to the tax base, for everybody's. Sometimes you get people leaving the cities, coming here, building nice houses, and they're willing to pay $2,000-$3,000 taxes to the town and regional district and the province. Because in Calgary, they're paying $3,500 or $4,000 taxes. They're happy to pay that, and there's new money. Until we see if and what amount of new money we have into the whole system, it's pretty hard to see everybody else who's been bit by inflation. We're going to bite by double what the CPI projected now is, so that someone else can catch up. So that's just the scenario I see.
Yes, and the long-term funding is definitely something that we will be raising in our strategic planning process. And as Director Vandenberg said, we did not request an increase last year. Or the funding we received through this committee was the same in 2024 as it was for our 2025 budget. So yeah, we plunk in some numbers going forward. We try to think of what we might be doing. And sometimes we have to reevaluate, and sometimes we could go, okay, we can do all of these wonderful things. So, and like I say, the grant funding climate is changing. That pendulum swings back and forth periodically. And right now it's going this way. It will come back that way eventually.
Joe had his hand up. He might have some numbers. I don't know.
Yeah, Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, Joe, just through the chair. So in the 2024 5-year financial plan, Tammy, just so you're aware, the number that we had in there from last year was 129,388. So not saying that that's what the number would be, but just know that is the number that we had in the 2025 the 2024 5-year. And Tammy, by all means, if there's any assistance that we can provide, just please don't hesitate to reach out to me, and we can see just how we can help with this budget to make it more clear for the directors.
Thank you.
Dr. Vandenberg?
So, and thank you. Just, it didn't toggle with me before, but it's further to Murphy equipment. If you were to delay that a year, that's 30 grand. And from what I see walking around, I don't know where you're going to create second levels, perhaps, where you're going to change out some things. I don't know what that's going to look like. But what does it mean if you were to consider deferring any part of that project? What does that mean?
It doesn't really mean much other than it's another year before we can really show that off to the public. We can absolutely, major building projects are always one of those things that are off until the funding.
I'm assuming this is a group of equipment that's going to come in and need a place to.
It's already there. I don't know if you would have seen it on Saturday. It was in behind the building where we had the refreshments. It's just sitting there. We're tarping it for the winter.
Okay.
Yeah. There are a number of options that we're looking at for where and how to display it. Most of them will require building a new structure on the grounds. And yes, that's a challenge because we don't have a lot of space there.
So if I may, then your strategic plan would address more restriction.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's time to look beyond what you have for confinement. Don't know.
Yeah.
And is it public on the white elevator right now?
What's public is that it is being dismantled.
Dismantled. That's it right now?
That's basically it right now.
Okay, so I
We
can't
have a
say,
meeting coming up in a month.
After November 29th. we
so I
should-
can't say anything further in terms of potential opportunities. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, and we have been talking to Columbia Basin Trust about opportunities at the site of the elevators.
The white
The
elevator.
red one in particular, yeah. So, yeah, they're not talking to us about the site of the white elevator until I think they've got a few more ducks in the row there. But yeah, we've been looking at that. We've acknowledged through various boards at various times that we don't have enough space down there, and our collection is constantly growing. I mean, we get something new in every single week, and sometimes it's one item, and sometimes it's a box full, and sometimes it's somebody phoning us up and saying, we've got 3 big barns full of stuff out here.
Maybe I could offer my services for an auctioneering to have an auction sale.
There you go. Yeah, there's
Fundraiser auction sale.
yeah, there's a few challenges with that, going back through the museum's history, because the nucleus of our collection came from the Yak Pioneer Park Museum, which went bankrupt and did try to sell the collection at auction. We are still dealing with that legacy, people who are convinced that all of this stuff got sold. Yeah. We can talk.
Just going to say, if Tammy's dad put enough work into fixing everything up, it might be able to sell it, but that wasn't the point I was going to raise.
Yeah. You can come down and help fix things up.
About volunteers with a lot of tools and skills. Eventually, what I can see happening is because of the bulk of some of the stuff, whether it's at a site that maybe it becomes freed up, maybe it's to do with the Creston Valley Fall Fair going maybe to farms or whatever, that we're going to see some offsite or alternative location for farm-related, some of the larger machinery. That would just make sense to have a farm-focused site.
Mm-hmm.
And then that would free up a tremendous amount of space, potentially a bridge in between. And so hopefully their strategic plan will talk about that. By the time we get there, we'll have considered as community what sites are available.
Yeah, and you should talk to Len Messenger because he's got a site for us already, the old Bell property up the top 16th. He would love to see that turned into a heritage orchard. Every time I see him, he's dropping hints, but it's kind of not in our budget.
Right, Chair, I just have a question while Tammy's here with regard, because on the agenda we have legacy project. Is the museum involved with Creston Valley Minor Hockey Association, or are you involved independently with that project?
Both. Yeah, I'm doing the content creation as myself independently. The museum is doing the collections management, that sort of thing. So yeah. It's a little hard to tell where one ends and the other begins.
Sure, but I think for us, it's just knowing that you're involved in that, and there's continuity with that as important.
Yeah, and we've been working hard. I can stick around for that part of the agenda if you want, but yeah, that's been a big part of what we've been doing the last several months.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was drowning in hockey stuff.
Anyone else? Tammy, as you know, one of the biggest crowds we ever had at a meeting was earlier this year when the museum was in crisis.
Yeah.
And the fact that it was in crisis really resulted in a lot of positive stuff, because at that time you'd run out of really good volunteers and everybody was running out of ideas. And so what's happened since then has been amazing for our community.
It's been very good to see. And thank you all for your support through that. It could have been very different. We appreciate it very much that you guys stood behind us.
When you had the open house, I was really happy to see how many things have changed already, and just exhibits and everything. Everything has been improved, and the rejuvenation has been really positive. So thanks for sticking it out.
Thank you.
Okay, Let's move on to our airport people, Creston Valley Regional Airport. You're welcome to come forward.
We can set this up.
Okay, guys, pick up the lost space.
Oh, we'll pick up space. I just want.
Bob there is to cheer you on.
What's that?
Bob is there to cheer you on.
Better back with the real first thing. But
Right.
to start with, I ask you to have patience with me. I'm a dirt guy, not a meeting guy, so I'm going to do the best I can. Volunteered to do this job, so here we are. But I need questions first. Do you guys even have this budget in front of you? You know what it is?
No, we don't.
Sure.
Chair.
You'll email it to everybody just.
Yeah, and it looked like a timestamp, but about 9:30. So our disadvantage is we have not had a chance to look at the budget.
Is it?
So
So you have something similar to this
we need to
spreadsheet?
have this sort of thing in advance.
Okay, so again, I'm new at this. This is, I'm just not even a year into this position, so I'm definitely trying to do better at this stuff. Basically what I believe we have here, the best of my knowledge as I've studied it, is we had an ask last year and the RDCK or through this organization, the major part of our funding comes and has for quite some time. With that, we try and spread it out the best we can as an organization to cover the expenses to operate the airport. Naturally, those increase on us. Our obligations increase, our education or our knowledge of what we should be doing increases. And we come up with more and more things that we need to spend money on. So we've done our projection based on historical expenditures. I know I was involved for the last year and we did have some projects that we were trying to accomplish there and we had kind of budgeted for them and then we received a reduction in our budget that made those kind of challenging. So we're still in that process. We're very, very happy to be in the process of our economic feasibility study and our master plan, which is going to really help us move forward. I think we're expecting to see the first part of that in December, or the town is, and I'm sure we'll be privy to it, and then the follow-up in March. But moving forward, we still have another year to operate through, and I think that's what we're here today for. So I believe that the question came to me secondary of what our ask is. Our ask for this year is 191,775. If I could put that together for you based on our expense line. Yeah, when we go down to the expenses, the administration, we have 60,000. Our maintenance contract is 38,280. The utilities at 21,000. Casara and ESAR is basically a pass-through for us. We get the funding, pass it through to those two organizations through the way we've maintenance line number 7, we have 59,000, and that maintenance does include in this budget ask a reserve of 8,000 to put aside for runway resurfacing in the future, and an estimated 25,000 a year to do the crack sealing and maintain the runway and surfaces that we have. Insurance, we're projected at 15,500, and the mortgage payment $14,613. So our math actually, I was just told, doesn't quite line up. And if we add all those together, that's 192,393. Is that a fix we're doing, or are we sticking with the 191,775?
No, stick with the 191.
Okay, so we're sticking with it. So part and parcel of this I believe within that grant is a $50,000 budget to do capital asset replacement, to replace some of the antique aging equipment that we use to maintain the airport. So what we've had to do in the past is we try and reserve that for asset replacement, but when we run short, we have to dip into that budget amount to cover our costs. Some of the primary things that we're seeing is increased costs in maintaining our equipment that through the master plan, we're going to be looking at some replacement options or some upgrade options, but our weather center that we have on the airport has a decent cost to keeping it going, but it's for safety and it's very valuable and it's very imperative that we keep it up to standards so that we can receive bigger aircraft, i.e. emergency services aircraft in that weather. That is very key to that component. And we're looking at upgrading that continually and maintaining it to become more and more valuable and important to that operation. So that service is available within the not so nice days. So the other significant change we had since we wrote this budget is that we were doing some study and investigation through just continued learning and we realized that we need, instead of a 10-year certification on our fuel tanks, we need an annual certification. So we don't even know what that cost is going to be yet, but it's something that we're working on right now to try and get it. But so with that and with what I think you presented, do you have questions?
Yes, thank you. So I guess just for clarity within staff, this grant comes out of S108, 107. Is that correct?
Oh, no. The airport is S240.
43 is
240
standalone. And who is the partners in 243, please?
240.
240?
Joe, go ahead. You were good.
Yeah, so through the chair, the description of the budget is correct. So S240 is the budget for the airport service in Creston ABC. There is the pass through to search and rescue to air SARS. So those things are correct.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, okay.
Thanks, Joe. Just needed that clarity moment. So my question is around, so you don't have the previous year, because previously we noted that fuel sales cost, your revenues were not paying for your fuel. But in this budget, you're actually making profit on fuel. So that's good. But to have 2024 in here would have been helpful. And so my question is around, I've got one around revenues and one around expenses. Do you pay taxes on the property for expenses to Creston? Because it's not in here. Property taxes?
I don't know. I believe, to the best of my knowledge, I'd have to get more, but I believe we pay the tax on the terminal building, the residence site there, and the maintenance building that we use for operations.
So it doesn't reflect in here that I can see. And that leads me to my next question. On the revenue side, do you get revenue from the hangars that are out there?
I believe that the town does pass that revenue back to us. So
the town collects the revenues?
The town collects the revenues. They are the owners and the leases are paying them.
So what I'd like to know is, so why is this revenue stream not available to S240 then? Why is this a flow through to the town? And my next question would have been is how much does it cost per square foot to have a hangar? Because to me, that's a big revenue piece. And we're being coupled with the expenses and with the grant request. But yet there's some tax revenue and hangar revenue that we're not a part of. So we'd like some clarity around that and why it's that way.
If I can, or go ahead. I'll do it first. I have a hangar. The regional district gets the tax money from our hangars. The taxes for the hangars go to the regional
I
district.
think they can.
Absolutely, that's who I pay. And the lease rental goes to the town. The taxes go to the RCK.
The town boundaries don't extend to the airport. It's just town-owned property within the regional district, within the electoral area.
Okay.
Also, this service is established from our standpoint as partners as an arm's length contribution service. We don't run the service. We don't have liability. We don't have the requirement to maintain the facilities. So it's a little bit of a complicated, and that's why the master planning exercise is going to try and sort some of this out, bit of a complicated and unique situation. But we don't, we have a service to operate this facility and take it all on, and through Craig, we know what's going on. Totally different from that. This is a contribution service. We say we can provide you some money at arm's length. And you're running something under a set of criteria, Transport Canada, every other one of your users, your insurance. So this is different. And that's why I wouldn't think we would want to be part of the direct negotiation for leases and stuff like that. But we can set an expectation that there's adequate revenues from a lease, from a hangar, to be reasonable instead of being, and I'm making an assumption here, perhaps historically a bit of a trade-off. People who have a vested interest in a leasehold hangar on the site maybe are the best volunteers and really support that site with a lot of in-kind contribution. That's kind of informal thing is difficult to deal with from our arm's length position, I believe. We can also set an expectation on fuel revenues. I went looking for it. I did when we last sat with the consultant, talked about the preliminary master plan, how we're going to get one. I did a scan on fuel revenues, and it just seemed silly that you wouldn't be making a clear profit on fuel sales. I had heard anecdotally, it's kind of nice to have low fuel sales because then people want to visit. Well, that's not business-like, and you can't expect the taxpayer to subsidize. So I think our expectation is that it's as business-like and across the board equitable to what you get if you went to Golden or you went to Kamloops or you went to Merritt. An expectation, but we're not forcing anything on this organization. We're just saying, here's what we're willing to contribute. Joe also probably has a better explanation.
Yeah, Joe, your hand up again, go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair. Thank you for the work on the. Just know that you can reach out to me anytime. Craig can give you my contact information. Though to the airport society, because I've helped Bob in the past just make sure that the presentation is done in a way that that the committee can understand it, and through to the committee. So we have the airport master plan, as Director Jackman has mentioned. So I think that process is very important. I am not sure if the committee's had an update on that. I'm not exactly sure where that process is at. I know that as Director Jackman will remember, the cemetery master plan did help create a lot of clarity and a lot of stability in that service. So hoping that does the same thing. A number of years ago, we did work with the Airport Society pretty closely to try to make sure that there was reporting on reserve funds to ensure that the facilities did have an asset management piece. So maybe some of this has been a little bit lost, but that airport master plan is critically important. I'm not sure. I haven't seen any reports or updates on that. So I'm not sure if our guests can provide any kind of an update on that and where that process is at.
I'm going to continue.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Now, the reason I'm asking these questions is the request is for $200,000 and it continues. So I'm of the opinion that now I don't know what revenues are coming in. I don't know what they're paying for. What I do know is that with some information on the budget, the request is for $200,000. So where's the value to the taxpayers to have this airport there? Yes, this master plan is critically important that we delve into and find out. It's like a strategic plan where this is going to be headed. I think there is tremendous value in the airport. It's just we haven't hit that golden button yet, where it could be. Like, it's one of the best located airports there is in this entire region. But it concerns me that I'm asked to invest $200,000 and I'm not quite sure what I'm getting in return. And a lot of the information, like the revenue pieces, are missing. The tax piece, the hangar piece. I mean, what kind of a picture is it painting for me? And then to be asked for another $200,000 each and every year, and not have assurance that this is the value that we're getting. Do you see where I'm going with this? That's why this started this conversation last year, and I'm adding on to this conversation this year. But it's important to me to understand how sustainable is that airport now, and where can it be more sustainable in the future? That's where I need to get to. And I'm reluctant to continue to pump money into something and I don't understand what the return is. So I'll leave it at that.
So I can tell you that through this economic study that is ongoing, we have learned a lot. And I believe that the answers to your questions are going to be answered in that study. Because when you compare it to Golden or Nakusp or any other community around, according to the information we were given within the process of that, we have a very economically feasible airport, very well cared for and very valuable and very prone to grow and complement the community in the near future if we can keep moving forward with it. And that's why I feel the master plan, the economic study, and all this to answer these questions is invaluable, and to give a path forward that we can now start to build upon that and open up revenue streams that are not available to us at this point because we don't have proper infrastructure in place to do that. And that's exactly what I would like to see in my involvement in the airport, is to see that growth and economic growth and physical growth of the airport to a point where it becomes an invaluable piece of the Kootenays, not just here, because we do have the best site for an airport in the Kootenays, and it could develop into something very, very large. We've spent a lot of time negotiating work with the wildlife center or the wildfire center to entice and encourage them to come and buy fuel. That becomes actually one of our best revenue streams if we can get the wildfire guys to come here and fuel their helicopters while they're fighting fire. And in response to the fuel thing, we do make a profit on fuel. And I would just put some clarification into that. Our jet fuel and our avgas is priced lower than anybody in the Kootenay to entice the traveling. But there is a profit base in it, and especially in the jet fuel. We have a significant profit in the jet fuel. But when you look at it from an operational standpoint and you realize that the very people that make the airport who and what it is are the people buying that gas, and you're already asking for their contributions of labor, time, management, and now you go and you up the price of avgas that they're the primary users of, hit them again. Is that reasonable? So we've tried to keep it in a spot where we understand that you're the primary users of the avgas that gets sold here. And we appreciate everything else you do, being the people who make this all happen. So we need to turn a profit on avgas. Yes, we have to make it viable and make sense. but we don't want to gouge you.
Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Dr. Jackson.
Yeah, so I did have a few more specific questions other than sort of our relationship. I will circle back to fuel a little bit because part of the fuel is the capital infrastructure. And so you may make a profit on what you buy and sell at, but that, if you were running a Shell or a Petro-Canada station, you got to include the cost of the taxes and the cost of the tanks and replacement of the tank. You got to include a lot more than the buy and sell gas. I think that's what Director Vandenberg is referring to. You probably don't make a profit on fuel. We know there was a massive amount of money to upgrade your card locks and stuff like this and the dispensers. You probably are still at a loss on fuel if you take in the capital cost and everything else related to that very expensive business of holding on to a environmentally hazardous material. And Shell and Chevron and everybody else includes all of that in their price of gas. Even though that, their profit margins exist compared to maybe where it's pumped out of the ground. So that is part of the cost of, the true cost of, and we have managers now. What is the cost of this building? It is not the heat and light and the staff. It is the tens of millions of dollars of capital that we're paying down and the ongoing maintenance being done today in the parking lot and the anticipated ongoing capital management, asset management. So all of those will begin to see through this master plan. So picking on fuel is easy because you can't say you're making a profit on fuel. You can just say that the level of subsidy is maybe not as much as it might have been if you just get a flow through. My more specific one is because you did mention replacement of, and it is some of antique equipment, old plows, stuff like that. But we don't see your reserve balance here. It'd be nice to know one. And then the other one, I don't quite understand the number. And maybe Joe has to answer first because of the kind of the perception of flow through to Kassar. You said you're asking for 191.8, and we had in the 2023 budget grants total of 201.8. So that'd be like the 191.8 plus 10K maybe for Kassar. I don't understand. Is your ask for 191,800 plus the amount that flows through? Your number seems lower than it should be.
The number is lower because of the reduction last year. I believe we did ask for 201 last year and we actually received 187, something like that.
Well, 180 through the chair.
Yeah, so I need Joe to break down the line item 57010 grants under the S240. The 2024 budget says we have an allowance in grants of $218,635. Through the chair, how was that split, Joe?
So through the chair, so this year's budget, so 2024, the grant to the Airport Society was $188,635. There was an additional, well, it's put into grants, but that's to the town of Creston of a $30,000 contribution towards the master plan, and that hasn't been paid out as of today. Next year in 2025, and again, so just to everyone in the room, that there was a change to the 2024 budget late on during the process last year, but right now the financial plan for 2025 had $215,729 as a grant to the Airport Society, but that was based upon previous discussions prior to the change in 2024. And we also have in 2025 another $15,000 contribution for the master plan. Those are currently in last year's financial plan.
So to clarify, in the future budgets, because what I'm looking at, from the 2024, about 25, 6, 7, 8, we have a placeholder for $230,729, as Joe just said, of which $15,000 would have been pulled off for the master plan. The rest would be available up to that amount for potentially the airport operation for the society. So the ask is well below our placeholder and pretty modest, is what I see. And you're trying to be realistic based, I guess, on what you got last year. And we were trying not to have a huge bump in taxation, knowing the master plan's expensive, tens of thousands of dollars. So we kind of try to level it up between the two. So that still leaves the gap, is what you may have put into reserve you didn't get. Yeah, but we don't see that. So it'd be nice as follow-up to get those reserve balances. What were you able to save for reserve in 2024? As Director Vandenberg pointed out, we don't see your numbers from 2024. And what is your current reserve balance? And then overall, I think I'm pretty comfortable with your current ask, but I think that's part of Bob is giving you enough coaching that you're going to just kind of stay the course until we know what that master plan recommends and what your opportunities are.
So, done with the numbers for right now, but it sounds like you have a lot of injection to the consultant on the master plan. Like you have a lot of conversation with that process, do you?
We did have some really good meetings with that program, yes.
It was a young lad that I think I bumped into him one day. It was just a young lad that was out there. So the only thing I want to throw is in there is, was there any talk about he reaching out to other successful airport locations like EIA Edmonton as part of, collecting what could be's, what if,
So
partnering, that type of an approach? Because to me, that needs to be part of a master plan.
specifically what?
So will he reach out to Cranbrook or Castlegar or Edmonton International and have a conversation, or Bonners?
In the process of developing the master plan?
Yep.
So they are in a position where they have done the master plan for most of the airports.
Okay.
While he was here, I do know he did have meetings with Castlegar, Cranbrook. They just finished a master plan with Golden, Fairmont Hot Springs. Nacosp, they're just finishing up development with them.
You've answered my question, because if the master plan comes back and those conversations weren't had, I'd be very disappointed. It's not a very well thought through master plan. So glad to hear that.
I believe he's been very in depth, reaching out to BC Medical, Wildfire, all of the component players to see not only where we're at today, but what the next 5 years would be like. And I'm really excited to see his plan. I'm not privy to how that's coming through, but I'm very excited to see it.
Okay, thank you.
He's reached out to the community, the Chamber of Commerce, and a lot of different groups that have potential for benefiting the airport more. So, well, as you say, it's quite thorough. The meetings that we've had with him through the town, we've been impressed with the work that he's doing.
How come he hasn't reached out to regional districts, directors?
We had one meeting with them, and I thought there were regional directors.
We were at,
I wasn't there.
perhaps not, council, we were invited into a early conversation. I was trying to find it. It was a couple months ago, beginning of September or something.
My bad.
Yeah, actually, it wasn't bad.
Yeah, I know they had meetings with the town and with the regional district, but I wasn't privy to those.
Well, I'm available again.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's any more of that phase now, or if they're ready to write the report. So I get you progressing.
I represented EIA, Edmonton International. It was in my area at one point in time. Got to know all those people very well. Know exactly what they did and how they built that cargo facility. Really, Edmonton's a cargo facility. But the innovation and the creativity that they used to model that and I was a part of it. It was really quite cool. So that's why I have an interest in your success.
So I'd sure love to see you come to our board meetings and help us with that, because
It's an invitation.
I believe there's one standing one.
I worked on airports federally for 13 years in Transport Canada, construction only. There's lots of experience, but your board meetings were consistently, I think, on the third Wednesday of the month, which is in direct conflict. Either I drive back and forth, or times like now, over the summit, because the ferry's out. So I've made very few over 15, 16 years. And it was September 26th special town committee of the whole on the airport, so there'd be minutes if town staff could give you minutes or notes perhaps, because it was a committee of the whole. It'd be presentation material attached to that you'd be able to see from September 26th.
In response to that, if I may, we are working quite hard to get the internet capable at the airport of holding Zoom so that you guys can attend our meetings through that avenue. But that is
Called Starlink.
Infrastructure problem. And oddly enough, Transport Canada has a fiber optic service there. And we are trying for all we're worth to get a connection and access to that. And that's our prime, that's as a function, that's our primary goal, is to get everything we have is internet based, and we have struggled with the internet. It's just, the service is not great. But that to involve you guys has exactly been on our agenda for the better part of a year now, to get the Zoom capability so you guys can attend the meetings.
Yeah, we'd have had John Kettler, Mike Wiggin drag me out there over the years, but it's been tough with the schedules, the way they align.
I'd like to talk to you a little bit later on after on the engineering side of things and some of the questions that we have around.
He's not cheap.
Around the structure of the runway and the capability of it.
Well, maybe permanent.
Yeah.
So Director Van Rooyen, if you have questions about the airport master plan and where it's at, just email ask for an update, because obviously you missed a meeting that probably you wish you would have been at. But if you want more information, just reach out to Mike and see if he can help you with that, because you should be more involved than you have been, I think.
Thank you.
It is.
Also, I'm going to text you Ben's email. I do know that that my dad had a lengthy conversation with him as well, and Ben was happy to talk to anybody that's been involved or wants to be involved. There's his email.
I see that. Thank you.
And that's the consultant, to be specific.
Okay. I think that's it then for the time being. Thanks for your information. The discussion will carry on after.
All right. Thank you very much.
I can find a little break.
Sure, I was going to grab the spot.
Yeah, that fellow went out there. Yeah, taxes. I'm impressed with. I don't know what he doing.
I was up there one night, to get the supervision Brock. It's on that board and then came across really very sharp.
Recording stopped.
I didn't realize that he was there as a consultant. Knew that he was there. I was just
Recording in progress.
Is going to,
I would move no further action.
okay. So no further action on 7.3 and no further discussion needed then on that, right?
Yeah, I think we would vote on that. There's no further action, then it disappears.
Just make a motion, no further action?
Yeah.
Okay. Moved by Director Jackman, seconded by Director Cuny, all in favor? Or not? All in favor, as I said, motion is carried. So we will continue then with 8.1 discussion item, Recreation Center Legacy Project. But wanted an update on that one, staff.
Yeah, I guess I could start off by saying there's seems to be a lot of miscommunication and misunderstanding going on with this project. And I just would like to know, where is it at and what type of an agreement are we talking about? Because the Legacy project has an understanding of an agreement, which seems to be different than what RDCK has for an agreement, who had said that we have a template that we've used or you're using in Nelson quite some time ago. But there's a delay of getting together and understanding where's the project at, who owns the project, who's going to manage the project, who's going to operate the project, who's going to retain the value of that project. That's kind of the questions that are up in the air right now. But to me, that should have been resolved a long time ago. This project's been going on for at least 9 months now. So I'm interested in understanding where are we at with it, and is there any opportunities to help things along?
Through the chair, I'll start with the where it's at, and we have an update from the proponent from their September update to the committee as far as the value of the budget and the progress of that. I don't have that as part of this update, but I can say that I think that they partially constructed the case, the legacy wall, actually used the curling club during the off season to do some of the construction. They've identified that they're $15,000 or $14,000 short in their funding, and not to complete the case. I think it's more to complete the other parts of the budget. And so we did talk about an MOU that the RDCK had with another organization in Nelson as a model that we could follow, but we never applied that in this situation. I think we did get a bit of ahead of ourselves in allowing the construction to happen before we had a services agreement in place. And to be clear for this committee, the two agreements that we'll enter into with this group, and one is draft coming to them very soon, is the services agreement to construct the case as a first step. And we've applied that model to other similar projects, including the pavilion that was built by Valley Community Services over by the Road Crest Hall. So it's basically a contractual agreement for them to build us a case according to the specs that they have proposed, and ensuring that the quality of the construction and the value that is approximate to what they're saying it is how we're going to frame that. And so that's the conversation that's going on right now to make sure we get there. And then the long-term agreement, which will come back to the committee before, because it will be a 5-year facility use agreement, will be the agreement that describes roles, ownership, et cetera, who has the right to and the responsibility to ensure that it's curated properly. And that was part of the question I had for Tammy Bradford, to ensure that, because we had heard that the museum was involved as a part of the steering group, but then also Tammy was involved as an individual. So we want to clarify those roles and make sure that what relationship we get into with Creston Valley Minor Hockey Association provides the outcomes that were described during the report. So yes, there's been a delay in getting the agreement. We have mitigated the risk with on-site staff and liaising with the proponent to make sure the construction is being done according to the spec. But we will hopefully have something in front of Creston Valley Minor Hockey Association for the services agreement very soon. And for this committee, the facility use agreement, to consider the ongoing management of that project. I'm hoping before the December meeting.
Anything else?
Well, I guess I'm not satisfied with that. This whole services and management and who owns the asset, there's a huge opportunity in terms of time missed where those conversations could have been tabled and had. And I mean, now we're looking at addressing those a year later. So you've got a committee that's put a lot of sourcing and revenue or resources into place, and I've seen what they've got. It probably very much meets the minimum standard requirement, but to me, it's. I guess I hear their concern that they don't know where they stand. They don't know what this is going to. In their mind, they have an understanding of how this is going to operate into the future and how the community is going to celebrate it, but they don't have that same feeling from RDCK. And certainly I'm glad to hear that when we get to the agreement stage of it, in terms of the roles and that sort of thing, that we as a group will have an opportunity to view that. I guess I would encourage that we need to get this thing dealt with and get it moving forward. Because this is a community opportunity that a group of people have taken on with the right intention and the right frame of mind. And I just don't want it to set a sour taste or bad tone for any other future organizations that would want to come and build a baseball diamond or manage it and whatever that might be in the future. Because this was delayed a little longer than what the expectations were thought to be. So I'll just leave it at that.
No, I appreciate that. And again, through the chair, the delay in the administration of this is staff's element. So we'll get in front of that. But we did have good conversations with the proponent and there's two pieces here. One is the committee, which the community was brought in, the museum, Director Vandenberg, the town of Creston, Yakima were involved, minor hockey, and the Creston Valley Thundercats. We're all part of that committee, but we're doing business with Creston Valley Minor Hockey Association as an organization. So that's the part that we're just trying to finalize those details, because that is who is paying for this. So money is going through Creston Valley Minor Hockey Association and paying for this project. So that's who we'll have the agreement with. But agree that we should have been further in front of this before we started cutting the timbers to create the.
I'm good. So now we will have Tom Newell, if you're there, Tom, for update on the Creston Valley Transit. There's Tom. Go ahead, Tom.
Good morning. I just wanted to, respectfully through the chair, I just want to take this opportunity to provide a small update regarding what's going on with Creston Valley Transit. We have a few things going on. I'm in the process. We're in, oh, sorry, I'm just trying to pull up my report here on my desktop. There we go. So yeah, provide members of the committee with an update regarding the development of the 2025 financial plan provide members of the committee with consideration regarding support for the Creston Valley Tour of Lights, and provide members of the committee with information regarding the Creston Cranbrook Health Connection route. I just wanted to give you some background on that route and how it's currently structured. Stuart had let me know that there was some interest in finding out if we could expand that route. So yes, we are in the throes of budget development right now. There are some things the committee should be aware of. I believe last year, the Creston Valley Services Committee requested that the board seek some transit expansion. We were looking at an additional 316 hours of service. And that service is really targeted to custom and on-demand services in the Valley. We're seeing a lot of demand for those services right now. Now, what happened is that BC Transit, unfortunately, did not receive everything that they had requested in their operating grant from the provincial government. So there was some shortfall. So while we did not get the full amount, we did get some. I think we got about an additional 160 hours, so about half of what we asked for, which I was pleased to get because in many instances, a lot of systems did not get any of the things that they had asked for. So that's going to be reflected in a small budgetary increase this year. I think we're looking at about 11%. That 11% is made up of expansion hours, some wage increases as a result of what's going on with the contract, and some increased maintenance on the buses. We anticipate looking at that over the course of the year. I'll give you some numbers with some improved resolution on it, probably starting in the new year when the budget discussion really begins in earnest. Are there any questions regarding the development of the budget right now, where we're at, any of the costs associated with the report that I've provided?
Not seeing any yet. Well, yeah.
Well, I guess really it maybe just to clarify the multi-year kind of, if we get expansion hours for an East Shore run, are we going to have anything at all to plug into the multi-year? Because that's what I want to take to community through the chair, along with you, Tom, and start talking about planning for 2026 now and 2027.
Respectfully,
you have numbers to plug in. Yeah.
Respectfully through the chair, I do have numbers to plug in. I haven't plugged them into the table in front of you in the figure 1 contract operating cost estimates, because this is based on what we have right now. But when you're ready to go talk to community around those costs, I fully have those numbers ready and can present them, show them what that means for tax implications for residents of Area A and the East Shore. Because of the way the cost split, as you're probably aware, your bylaw uses a criteria-based apportionment. So, those costs, the majority of those costs would be shared by the residents that actually use the service, which was, how the committee wanted to proceed with the apportionment of these costs. But short answer is yes, I'm ready to bring those numbers forward. We do have numbers from BC Transit.
So supplemental, is there any reason not to just put them in the draft budget right now, even if those hours never come to fruition? I don't quite understand. If those numbers would be a separate package of information that we take to Area A residents, or if they're going to go on this will we see them in January when we start to see a big full draft budget? Will we see all those bigger numbers for 26, 27, 28 projected out there? Along with that, then I can have the proper conversation with the community. Right now, they're trying to use their new van. There's 2 vans being used to shuttle people on the East Shore. And the first number they've come up with is they might charge people $20 a round trip to go from, say, Kootenay Bay to Creston. The sooner we see numbers of what this provincially supported system costs, the sooner people can wrap their head around the actual cost of moving people around. Is $20 reasonable? I know I cannot do the $20 round trip from Boswell. It's just gas alone, $20 or it's $20. So can I see the numbers in the entire draft? And my colleagues will see those numbers, and it might look scary until they see the apportionment. But can we see them in the budget documents in January, so I can go to the East Shore Transportation Society and say, this is potentially real, and let's start crafting the use of the community shuttle vans around potential future routes so we can build ridership data. But I'd like real numbers behind it so people understand the real cost of getting on a bus which I think historically we'd seen 25 to 30 bucks per rider per trip. Those kind of numbers, I think you've shown me in the past, Tom. And those were not long distance trips. Those might have only been 10 kilometers each way.
Respectfully through the chair, they certainly can be incorporated when I present the budgets in January to the committee. I'll include those numbers in there.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, because, thank you through the chair, because Tom is here, I recognize that on our items action list, there was some, this conversation around transporting from Creston to Cranbrook for the purpose of health. I think I'm just trying to.
Yep.
GC Transit, with regards to transportation between Creston and Cranbrook, staff will update the committee at the November meeting. Well, that's where we are. And while you're here, Tom, is there anything, I presume it would be in your bailiwick. Yes, it is. Do you have anything to add to that?
Respectfully through the chair, BC Transit is working with Interior Health Authority, looking at health connections across across all of West Kootenay Transit and Creston Valley Set Transit services. We have a number of different funding arrangements. We've expressed some dissatisfaction regarding those arrangements right now. Staff are concerned that when I look at the cost of the increase in costs in transit, and look at the increase in the funding made available by IHA for Health Connection, I don't see these costs moving in lockstep. They seem to be moving at 3.5%, 4% a year, whereas a lot of our transit costs are moving up at 6 and 7% a year, largely driven by improved maintenance cycles and wages. So these are important improvements that we're seeing, but that IHA funding is not necessarily keeping up with that. Which moves a larger percentage of the cost of those trips over to the local government side of the ledger. And it's a trend we've been seeing. So these conversations are ongoing right now. We definitely express the need for more service between the regional health hubs, whether it be Trail or Cranbrook, and let IHA know that this conversation will be ongoing.
And supplemental to that, Tom, as part of what's called a status update, that is to update the status of this, could we suggest to you that we would visit this again at a period, say February of 2025? I mean, that gives 3 more months to, and I don't know that IHA, Interior Health will change their position, but we need to, will there be more information available to us in a few more months, I guess is my question.
Respectfully through the chair, there'll be more actions on the part of staff and on the part of BC Transit. And as you're aware, now is when budgets are being developed. So now is when we really have to start putting pressure on people and start having these conversations and engaging at as many levels as possible. IHA has been reluctant to engage, to say the least. This is a conversation that they're not particularly excited about, but it is a conversation that we are going to have, so long as it's very effective in terms of healthcare costs to centralize things, especially if patients can't get to the hospital. You save a lot of money. That's sort of been my line on this. If we continue to get patients to the hospital, you're not going to realize all the savings, but people will actually be receiving medical services.
I'd like to share a story if I may through the chair.
Why don't you?
Because Tom is here. So have you been to Coeur d'Alene, Tom, and ridden their, and to anybody actually, their transit system there?
Respectfully through the chair, I have been, and yes.
They don't have one. What they do have is for seniors and medical appointments and that sort of thing. Talking to the locals, to the taxi driver that drove us around because that was the only way we could get around. That referendum came up on 2 occasions in the city of Coeur d'Alene, and the taxpayer said no to subsidizing a public transit system. I was shocked because of the size of that city. I assumed there would be a transit system there. We walked all sorts of, for a couple miles trying to find transit signs, couldn't find any, went into a department store and they gave us the number to the taxi. The taxi guy told us the story. And I was amazed that that group of people, those citizens, determined that they were not interested in publicly funding a transit system. I thought that was an amazing story.
Respectfully, through the chair, we had a very similar conversation. It was either a Lyft or an Uber or something like that we had utilized, and it was a very similar story. When we were asking about it, they've just declined to proceed like that.
Sure. I mean, we had the conversation, and Tom was in part of them, about could we use a taxi pass system here? Problem was there's barely a taxi service here, and it's a cart before the horse thing. Because we discussed that. We discussed when they were merging things in Kamloops, I think it was, going across the river to the reserve area there and stuff like that, big housing developments. Like, what are the options to get connectivity to areas where, try and get people out of their car? So it's a little bit between a rock and a hard place. We have seen huge success on US Transit, which I get to look at all the time because Area A pays a tiny little bit into it. I don't know if we're ever going to get there in Creston Valley. I'm not ready to give up on it. But either we have a robust taxi and or Uber service here, and we could consider that kind of approach and only have the Handy Dart and the health connections, or we plug along with what we have and see whether or not, as maybe towns zoning and planning changes take hold, we'll find more people, maybe the 20 to 30 demographic, that realize owning a car doesn't make sense for everybody. Now, the other mark we have against us here is you can't even rent a car easily. So if you go to communities where you rent a car, and I know people when I was in my 20s, why would they own a car in Vancouver? Expensive to park, expensive to house. They had to pay additional if they rented. It made no sense to have a car. You go down and get a $99 weekend special and have a car for Friday, Saturday, Sunday if you needed to go to Whistler or whatever. We're not there. So I don't know which model we're going to end up seeing, but until we have a taxi and or Uber and or car rental system here, I think there's small hope that transit will catch on if we continue to see a younger demographic. And town has seen that shift. We haven't rurally, but town has seen that. And that's maybe partly why I'm not willing to give up on transit. In fact, I want to see it extended part of Area A. We have younger people in Area A that people used to work for me, that they were worried about how far my construction site was from their home because of the price of gas. Or they had to pay more insurance as young people, way more insurance as a young person because they're driving to work and back, and that puts them in a higher category. If they had some other way to get there, they would have. Not that we're going to have daily service on the East Shore, but we're so different from some of these other communities. Things we don't have. Transit's sort of a bare bones option.
Comparing us to a service in the United States with their philosophy on taxes and what we get for them, which looks like it's changing even more conservative than it has been. Kind of hard to compare what we do and what we need for the lane. Appreciate what they're doing, but I don't think it's hard to compare our needs and again how our needs can be supplied here, as Dr. Jacqueline said. So.
No, and it was just a huge eye opener, but it makes you step back and consider it for a moment or two. And I don't disagree with that, but I assume that a population center of 100,000 people would have transit, and that's my naivety. So it kind of allows you to step back and reconsider all that. And Tom has his hand up.
Go ahead, Tom.
Respectfully through the chair, I just want the committee to consider the work of Alex Lefebvre through CSLAC with the Rural Mobility Working Group that's gradually being established, a group of sort of transportation ecosystem interested parties. You've seen a lot of these people actually speak at the board and to various committees. Staff is working with people in the community to talk about the broader transportation ecosystem and options for services and how might the regional district sort of plug into those options, support those options, and make sure that the networks that are sustained by the regional district are engaging with those options, whether they be active transportation, car share, ride share, or possibly even professional services like Lyft and Uber. So we are starting to sort of expand the gaze of the organization, realizing that transit is not a magic bullet and it won't be the solution for all of the transportation needs in the rural or municipal areas, but it's a key piece. It's the backbone. And then from there, you know, we're going to have to find ways to further engage with other community partners.
Yeah, we have two recommendations before us. Did you want to speak on them before we kind of give a nod of our heads to it?
I'm just going down to those that the committee recommends staff review the fare schedule for Creston Valley Transit. Sorry, I'm looking. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, we have it in the report, what the proposed increase is. And the fact that it hasn't been increased for a long, long time. So
respectfully through the chair, it's been quite some time. And what I would do is I'd be engaging with BC Transit to do a quick fare review, to have a look around the province at comparable systems, to take a look at our ridership, consider the impacts on ridership. They have a very well-worn path for these processes. There'd be a quick turnaround on it, and then we could come to, and we would bring the results forward to the committee for consideration.
I would move both recommendations as a block since we're in committee and they're fairly straightforward.
yeah, and last year we discussed the tour of rights and its advantages. So I think we're all familiar with that well.
So moved as a block.
Moved as a block, seconded by Director Vandenberg. Further discussion? All in favor? There you go.
Chair, can I make an observation? Just a quick number. If we were to put 200,000 subsidy into the Creston Transit, which is be quick where we're going to be or a little more, we're taxing $11.5 million through regional district. That doesn't include taxation through town of Creston. Doesn't include any other provincial taxes, of course. But of our RDCK side, this is about 1.7% of the money we take out of people's pockets for something that's voluntary. But this rec center is voluntary. So to keep it in perspective, it's significant, not huge. Is it going to go somewhere? And I think we have the right approach, and we can model it similar to the success in Kootenay West Transit, where we just ask people what they need and when they need it, like they did in Kootenay West, and then all of a sudden people said, okay, that's convenient, saves me money, I'll do it. I'm hoping Tom is going to be able to put that lens on us, and we will get some ridership. Because a couple times I've been on the bus, I was the only person on the bus.
Yeah, I think our intent would be to dramatically increase ridership if we could, because it is a very convenient service and also use it. Okay. Anything on the action list?
Couple of questions. Yeah, I don't know if Stuart is still with us. I haven't bounced back and forth very well here. If I can, Chair, I mean, item 1 has fallen back due to other work priorities that I can open the tab here where I have it. Got to have more than that. I'm feeling a little bit like Director Vandenberg now. Sorry if you don't take that the right way, but this has fallen back in the priority list since January 2023. So we're right on the edge of 2 full years. We need a date, a target date to say, well, things can fall back on a priority list, but now this is going to be done between April and May of 2025. Put that in there, make a commitment, put it on somebody's individual work plan. And I can go down the list past item 1, item 2, the dog bylaw. I want to know what the initial response from Jordan or our development services was. Is it a sensible approach that 90% of the work that I have to do for a region-wide dog bylaw would be directly applicable to area ABC? And if that's reasonable, let's do it. And item 4, same thing as the other. Let's set a target date that in the December meeting, a month from now when we meet, for item 4, we actually see a new target date. Because we spend a lot of time talking with clubs and groups, tennis, baseball, whatever, which ties staff time up without the clear criteria. Whereas if we just did this, maybe staff would spend 50 hours now and would all spend less time later. Item 5 says it's funded in the 2024 budget. For the Kootenay River Secondary School, the MOU with School District 8. So if that's consultant funding, I guess, is that being moved to 2025 next year? Because we're almost done with 2024. And then to item 8, same thing, a target date. Item 8, I guess, after we sit and have our workshop on November 15th, I would hope that by that afternoon, since the same person will be involved, by the afternoon of November 15th, I'd like to see the email come out with a target date for our local workshop so that we can get to understand these traditional use studies a little better. So the message top to bottom is please target some dates and then move the date if you have to. But item 1 is the worst example. It says it's fallen back. It just doesn't work because the dog thing is when I say 7 years or 8 years, I'm not exaggerating. It's that long and longer. So target dates, and I don't expect dates today, but I'd love to see a date for every one of those by our December meeting.
Director Vandenberg.
So further to Director Jackman, I guess he addressed the 2 that I had number 11. The policy around capital reserve investment. I mean, we're heading right into the thick of a budget season. It's going to come before us probably next meeting. But yet, do we have any conversation around establishing that reserve policy? Would be my question. It says ongoing. So, but I'd like to back up a little bit and say that the value of this action list is tremendous. The difficulty that I see, or the challenge from staff, is assignment on who is the one responsible for updating this information or looking into where we're at, so that when we go from one Valley Services to the next, we actually could see some of these changes that perhaps that Director Jackman just pointed out. So a couple of thoughts. Number 1, is it advantageous to assign a staff person to manage our action list? That is, make those conversations with the people that are involved in all of these so that it's properly prepared. And it's not Robin's job, I don't think, but it's properly prepared that it hits us on our meeting dates, and it's not us asking again and again and again, where's this ongoing, what's the status, and so on and so forth. Just a suggestion, one idea. Secondly, what I find difficult is, as I look at the new one, I have to go back to the old one to remember what we said last time is it reflected in the new one? So what I would propose is, for example, item 10 ought to come off. Okay, so item 10 is meeting with KES. So it says complete. So, but before you just take it off, maybe the idea is to, after this meeting, put lines through it. That indicates that the next time that we see it, anything with lines through it, means that the previous meeting we said to take it off, and we have sober second thought, perhaps, as opposed to allowing it just to evaporate and disappear. Maybe as a standard, whatever we decide to be removed, we just simply line it out so that the next meeting we can confirm, yep, that's definitely, and then it disappears. Just a suggestion, 2 suggestions. 1, have somebody in charge of making sure that this is up to date and rattling the cages of those that need to be rattled. Do you have anything more to add to this? Secondly, as a way of making sure that things are dropping off appropriately, just a step of lining through it for a month before it actually drops off. Just a couple thoughts.
The only request I would make as chair, when we're setting our agenda, we look at our action list. We could certainly take items 1 and 2 and similar items, put it back on the agenda for staff to update us on it. And so we have a bit of a Q&A as to where they're at and why it's where it is. So rather than just look at an action list and and discuss it there. I think some of these might be important enough just to pull them back on an upcoming agenda. Have a more full report of what's happened since being on the list. And, you know, as you look at the first one there, started 5th of January 2023, it's fallen back on the priority list. Perhaps we need to recall it as an agenda item then with the staff assigned and get some clarity on where we're actually at with it and why. So that we don't have to just look at it on the list. We look at it as an agenda item to maybe provide further staff direction or whatever is needed. But I'd like to see that, you know, in our established, you know, agenda so that we don't just look at it as a list. And
So with that idea in mind, if I may, Mr. Chair, is this is the time to do that then? Because in a month's time from now, we get the agenda 2 to 3, although we got really good this time, Rob. Thank you. It was, you know, but still my time to try to put time to read it through and then have to respond. I can't. You know, because we had talked about when you get the agenda, then make your notes about what action items you want to talk to. And I find that just too hard to do. There's too many moving parts in my life to do that. And if I can't count on the entire agenda getting to me within 3 working days, not including the weekend, because I like to take the weekend off, then I can't participate that way. But I do agree with what you're suggesting is part of our conversation today should be, maybe we should be earmarking some of these things to be addressed for the next meeting.
So on that line, I'd pick items 1 and 2 to go on active on the December agenda. I'd pick item 2 because, of course, it's not October 2024. We tried to redirect it, but it is at least a 2023 or older item.
Yeah.
And the importance on item 1 is that Bob Kitching just said it today when we were standing off to the side during the break, that these societies have different annual year ends. And they had an expectation, or Bob had an expectation, that some of this information they're providing, lead-in information today, they could provide as late as February, but that doesn't work. But it's interesting that he made that observation just a little while ago. He says, well, you know, stuff that by February. No, we need it now because everything rolls together. So that's the importance of clarifying this to everybody. Now, I know Joe has worked with finance and other staff to make sure that there's some documentation sitting in finances on the docket showing, did they have an AGM? Did they have directors? You know, that kind of basic stuff. If they're an active, viable society to be eligible to receive financial grants. That's one thing, but there's the big other thing that's missing. They might think, oh, I did that paperwork, it's sitting with finance, but talking to us, that's still a big blur.
Yeah.
So those 2 items, I'd love to have a little more conversation in December, doing catch up on the budget one, and then maybe there's some really good news on the dog one. We'll see.
Item number 4 too, I think is one that would like us to circle back to an agenda item because we are getting all these requests and they're continuing and they're broadening and we don't have a clear process. And so just to get an update where we should be going with this rather than just read it on a list at the end of the meeting.
That one is very complex, item 4, though.
Very complex, but
because of our partnership arrangements with different groups and stuff.
Yeah.
So would you like a motion and direction to staff? That I think it's a great idea. Let's just do it. Let's just say that for the purpose of December, can we get an update on 1, 2, and 4?
Bring them onto the regular agenda.
Maybe make that a practice. One day this thing's going to disappear. That's great. You know?
No, it won't.
I just think it helps us progress better than to just discuss it on a list and see where we're at. So
through the chair, number 4 is a workshop. But Director Vandenberg saying we should have an update on number 4 for the next meeting.
I heard 1, 2, and 4.
Yeah. So just sometimes updates and sometimes
through the chair.
Go ahead.
Number 4, we just require a workshop day from the committee.
Mm-hmm.
So that
May I
we have the paperwork prepared. We just need a date that the committee can set aside to do a workshop.
So number 4 is just.
I might not be very clear in that, sorry.
No, but number 4 may be just a simple matter of giving us an update at the next meeting as to where we're at with setup of a workshop, just so we know that we're progressing, because
Or you could schedule a workshop. as part of
Sorry, through the chair to Craig, we're waiting for a workshop date. Like if the work is actually yours to do through that workshop. We have a format for you to do that. We just need a workshop date that the directors feel works into their
Are you wanting us to
schedule.
come to you, or are you coming to us with these dates? Because that's the loss. That's the problem right now.
Yeah.
Nobody understands who's going to do the next move.
So we can send out workshop. We can try and coordinate workshop dates away from this, but usually it's easier if it's done at this table.
But I don't think I'm going to have an advisory planning meeting the afternoon of December 5th, because we're pushing them now to something else. So can we make it the afternoon of December 5th, Thursday, December 5th?
You could do a lunch.
I think we could do that. I better check it too.
Did you hear that, Joe?
Sorry, December 5th works.
December 5th, following Creston Valley Services.
Yeah, works for me. And then I guess just agreement, I had suggested the removal of item number 10. If everybody's in agreement with that, then we would strike lines through it. It would show up next month, but it would be, then we would, it would be gone the month after.
Sure.
So do we need a motion on just to bring them back, or just a suggestion that we come back with the
Just kind of direction to staff right here to put it on the agenda.
Put it on the
I think we're
agenda.
good. She types faster than all of us anyways. Already on there, isn't it?
All right. Anything else on the regular meeting before we go to close? Nothing. We go,
Public?
Oh, public questions. We
Yeah,
did have
is there any public online? I don't think there is.
Observer is still there. iPhone is there. Oh, iPhone is Martin.
Through the chair, iPhone is marked.
Good. I don't think we have any public online.
Observer would have.
One observer.
On observer?
So I move that if there's no public questions, I move the meeting be closed to the public.
Okay. We have the mouse or one observer then. When we reconvene, I'll need a motion that Councillor Dumas has 3 minutes water.
Chair, did you want to vote on closing the meeting to the public?
Okay, motion to close the meeting to the public. All in favor?
And I move we recess the open meeting to the closed meeting to conduct the closed.
Seconded by Director Tierney, all in favor? Carried. So I can call the meeting to order then.
Well, observer is still there.